Welcome to this screencast on the comma rules. Everybody knows them, everybody uses them, and not everybody loves them. A comma. It's a punctuation mark used especially as a mark of separation within the sentence. Most of us kind of intuit how to use them. We listen for those little spaces in our sentences. When you read aloud, you can hear the pauses, those tiny stops within a sentence. But sometimes we use too many, sometimes we use too few. So let's learn the rules so we have a way to guide us in our usage of commas. So today's lesson is how to master the unruly comma. 2 false beliefs. You do not sprinkle them and you do not spray them. Some people just use commas willy-nilly, but you're not going to do that because you're going to learn the 10 comma rules. There are a few more, but these are the ones you need to know. All right, I'm going to ask you to pause the video right now and read these. So how'd you do? Do you have them all under your belt? Probably not, because there's a bunch and it filled the whole page. So let's break it down into categories, because if you think about the rules in categories, it's a little easier to remember. And there are 4 categories: introductory words, series or lists, the CC fanboys rule, which is about coordinating conjunctions in a compound sentence, and interrupters. So let's get started. Introductory wording. There are 4 kinds of, this is the rules for all those words that come at the beginning of a sentence before you get to the sort of main part of the sentence. There are words, prepositional phrases, participial phrases, and adverb clauses. And I have used all 4 in a very dorky sentence. And you see I put a comma after each one of these. Okay? So, first rule. Use a comma after certain introductory elements. It could be an interjection that doesn't take an exclamation point, or words like well and yes and no. So here are 2 examples. Thanks, I appreciate a good vampire book, or no, you may not eat 20 cookies for dinner. Pretty straightforward, that one. The next one is you use a comma after a series of introductory prepositional phrases. You do not need to put a comma after a single prep phrase, but when you have a series such as over the river, through the woods, then you put a comma, or in the middle of his song, comma. That way you are signaling to us that the main part of the sentence is about to begin. Introductory participial phrases. You use a comma after one of these, but what is it? Okay, so it's a phrase that begins with a participle. And a participle is a form of the verb, but it's used as an adjective. Basically, it's a word ending in ing, ed, or en, and it functions as an adjective. Here are 2 examples. Running late, she hurried to sign in. Running late here is describing she. The she who is running late. Frozen, I ordered hot chocolate. Again, these are, you can see logically they kind of need to be set off because the comma signals we're moving on to the main part of the sentence. An intro adverb clause. You use a comma after an introductory adverb clause. So what are those? Well, a clause has a subject and a verb, and an adverb clause begins with a subordinating conjunction, such as after, although, because, before, if, when, whether. We will be studying the adverb clause later, and you'll have a list in your grammar book. But generally, we feel a natural pause when you read a sentence out loud that begins with one. So, when Edward Cullen smiles, comma, Bella sighs. Although she read Twilight, she prefers the Harry Potter books. All right? Now, the next 2 rules have to do with series or lists, things that come in a row. Items in a series, or 2 or more adjectives preceding a noun. The series, items in a series, serial comma. Okay, that's what it's called, or the Oxford comma. You use commas to separate items in a series. I like cookies, cake, and pie. This comma here is the serial comma. It's the one that we use. If you write for the Washington Post, they don't always use it. France, comma, Brazil, you can see the commas here. They've all won the World Cup in soccer more than once. We use the serial comma to avoid confusion. Look at the sentences below. I dedicate this book to my sisters, Taylor Swift and Selena Gomez. Without a serial comma here, it looks like I am related to these two singers, which makes no sense. So I need the serial comma to make clear my intentions in the sentence. The other thing, sort of series, if you will, kind of rule, has to do with adjectives. If you use a comma to separate two or more adjectives preceding a noun. She bought a pink frilly dress for the dance. Using commas properly makes for proper, clear writing. There's an exception. Sometimes there are adjectives before the noun and they don't need a comma, and kind of a rule of thumb is if you can't switch the order. You could say a frilly pink dress or pink frilly dress, but you really can't say the brick red house, that sounds silly, or the leather green shoes. What you want in those cases, because the adjective next to the right next to the noun is so closely aligned with it, you don't need a comma. It's a squirrely rule, I admit it. The next rule is the coordinating conjunction fanboys rule. And this is when you have compound sentences, that is two independent clauses that are joined by a fanboys conjunction. So the fanboys are for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. And when you are joining two independent clauses using a fanboys conjunction, you need a comma. Oops, I'm gone. There it is. All right, so right here, you need Mary wanted to read Twilight. That can stand alone. She had to study for a big test. That stands alone. Here's the comma and the conjunction. Same here. We have a fanboy here, and we have the comma. And I always tell kids, if you want to know if you really need the comma there, put your thumb on the fanboys and ask, do I have a sentence before and a sentence after? If they can both stand alone, then add the comma. The last group are the interrupters. They are groups of words that interrupt the flow of the sentence, and you set them off with a pair of commas. Think of that as kind of like the same way that you would set something. You'd use parentheses. You need a beginning and a closing parentheses. All right, there are three types: the appositives, the non-essential adjective clauses, and the non-essential participial phrases. So appositives, use commas to set off appositives and appositive phrases. What's an appositive? Well, it's a word with or without modifiers set beside a noun or pronoun that identifies or explains it. I think of it as like a giant noun phrase. All right, and an appositive phrase is that sort of noun word and some other words working with it. Let's look at them because they're much easier to understand when you see the example. So you have Miss Treadwell, comma, the athletic director, comma, is really tired of the rain. This is adding more information about Miss Treadwell. It's identifying her, and this is the noun, this is the appositive, and these are sort of the words working with the noun, which is the appositive. Okay, so you see it's like a giant noun phrase. It's adding information. It's not describing her, it's adding information. Her brother's room, a world-class mess, smells of old sneakers. Again, here's my appositive. It kind of interrupts, and I put commas around it. The non-essential adjective clauses. Use commas to set off a non-essential adjective clause. An adjective clause has a subject and a verb, and it begins with one of these relative pronouns. Right now, let me just tell you, if you have an adjective clause beginning with that, it is essential. It doesn't use commas. But for the others, you use a comma for a non-essential adjective clause if you have the clause and it just adds something extra, but you don't need it. Edward, comma, who is a vampire, comma, has the hots, or is that the cold, for Bella. Or, I thought that Bella, comma, who is supposedly the heroine, comma, should not be so wimpy. I can take out those clauses. Edward has the hots for Bella. I thought Bella should not be so wimpy. I just added a little information. The exception is essential adjective clauses. The girl who won American Idol earned $100,000. We need who won American Idol. We can't just say the girl won $100,000 because which girl? We really do need to know. So that's an essential adjective clause. But for non-essentials, things you can take out and it doesn't affect the meaning, use commas. And finally, interrupters, a participial phrase. You use commas to set off a non-essential participial phrase. To review from the beginning, a participial phrase begins with a participle that is an ing, ed, or en word and functions as an adjective. The night sky lit up with lightning and thunder, waking everyone up. Here's the participial phrase. You see the ing. I put a comma here and a period in this case. I don't need an end comma. The period functions as the closing of that. And finally, our last example, Osman, smiling widely, said, "Go away." Here's the thing that's interrupting. And so we set it off with commas. And with that, it is time for you to master the 10 rules and go away. Thank you.